what does the progression and the growth of Caleb Williams look like? And what does the relationship between Caleb Williams and Ben Johnson look like moving forward? Because the media has done a lot to show that it isn't just sunshine and rainbows right now in Chicago, right? Everything from a report perspective I'm seeing is he's messing up play calls, there's pre-snap penalties, there's misalignments. He's been frustrated, as recently as today, even Ben Johnson acknowledged the fact that Caleb Williams has lost a little bit of confidence. And because of that, there was a time early in training camp where Ben Johnson was so frustrated with Caleb Williams that he actually took the first team off the field. He was like, all right, first team off. Like, I don't want to see this. Like, there was just too many misalignments. He wasn't getting the play calls right. And so Ben Johnson was like, all right, second team, come in. Like, I've seen enough from the first team. You guys shouldn't be here. And so it's extremely vital for Caleb Williams to have a productive preseason game. Like I said, generally you don't see starters play in the preseason. I expect to see Caleb Williams playing in the Bears uniform in preseason game 1. That's how much turmoil I think is going on in Chicago. I think Ben Johnson would be the first to tell you that he wants to see what Caleb Williams looks like in a preseason game. Ben Johnson didn't ask for Caleb Williams. Ben Johnson didn't draft Caleb Williams. He has a specific style, right? He was the offensive coordinator for the Detroit Lions. They had an amazing offense last year with Jared Goff. Jared Goff is a great quarterback. Was another first round pick in the NFL draft. But Caleb Williams is definitely more highly touted coming out of college, right? Jared Goff, I think, was a late bloomer in a sense where people didn't really talk about him all the time until really up until the draft for him. But Caleb Williams was sort of thrown to the first pick of the draft the year before he was even drafted. Everyone was looking at him kind of like the way they're looking at Archie Manning right now. Everyone's like, "Oh yeah, Cam Ward's great, but wait till next year. Wait till the next year's quarterbacks come out." That's what it was like when Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels were in the draft, right? Caleb Williams, first off, to go into this a little bit, like what his last year looked like. What I'll say is like he had, I would say, a solid rookie year. Wasn't extremely impressive, but it definitely wasn't something where I'd say like, oh, this guy's a bust. He had over 3,500 yards, he had 20 touchdowns and 6 interceptions. His QBR was not good. His QBR, he was near last from like a starter's perspective. It was a 46.7 last year. So you're gonna need to see an improvement from that perspective, right? If you look at his completion percentage, 62.5% completion percentage, that's not terrible numbers, but it still needs to improve, right? Your top caliber quarterbacks are it's 65% and above, right? So, 2/3 of your passes, right? That's what, if you want to be considered a top quarterback, like that's number one on the list is your completion percentage. It has to rise over 65%. But also, it comes down to the fact that Ben Johnson, again, he didn't pick Caleb Williams. And so he still has to prove himself in this offense, right? Ben Johnson might be coming into this season saying, this is a prove it year for Caleb Williams, right? This happens pretty often with these high draft picks where they get on teams that aren't successful, right? Like I think a good example of this would be the Jets. The Jaguars are constantly in this carousel, as are the Browns. But Caleb Williams wasn't drafted by this new regime in Chicago. Now the GM, yes. I don't think the GM somehow got an extension. I don't understand that part. That's a whole nother conversation. But Ben Johnson didn't ask for Caleb Williams, and that means a lot more to a coach and to a team than you would actually think. And so again, I do expect to see Caleb Williams playing in the preseason. I am concerned about what I'm hearing out of training camp. I saw a clip yesterday, and again, it's just a clip, right? take it with a grain of salt when you hear people talk about this, including myself. It is obviously a show, so you got to get into it a little bit. But they were showing a clip of Caleb Williams, and he was just passing. He was throwing the ball, and he was trying to hit this net, and the net has different pockets. Well, he threw 5 balls, and he didn't hit a single one, and he was just frustrated afterwards, right? Like he just looked pissed off. He looked like a child that was mad that like his parents took away his favorite toy, right? That's the best way to describe what Caleb Williams looked like after this drill. He was just mad because he didn't hit the target like 5 times in a row. And so, again, it's going to be really interesting to see how this relationship develops, because if Caleb Williams doesn't step up to the plate, I see Caleb Williams being someone that's going to be out the door sooner rather than later. When you're a first round pick and you're a first pick in the draft, you have expectations that come with that. And everything I'm hearing coming out of this training camp so far, he is not meeting those expectations. That's it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. Please like, comment, tell me your takes. This is Bad Takes from Bad Takes in Football, signing out.